The night the yacht exploded in Seabrook Harbor, Ethan Cole made a choice that would destroy his quiet life. He became a hero. But heroes don't always get happy endings, especially when they're single dads hiding from the spotlight. The woman he pulled from the flames? A billionaire CEO who wouldn't stop until she found him. This is the story of a rescue that changed everything, a vanishing act that sparked obsession, and a little girl's whisper that shattered all the walls between them. Stay until the end, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The water was black glass under the pre-dawn sky, reflecting nothing but the distant lights of Seabrook Harbor like fallen stars. Ethan Cole's hands were steady on the wheel of the Maddie's Hope, his small fishing boat cutting through the Atlantic with the practiced ease of a man who knew these waters like the lines on his own palm. The air tasted of salt and diesel, and somewhere in the darkness, gulls were already crying their morning songs. He'd been out here for 3 hours checking his lobster traps in the cold. His thermos was half empty, his fingers numb despite the gloves, and his mind was on the mortgage payment due next week. Always the mortgage, always the bills, always the careful calculation of whether he could afford to fix the boat's engine or pay for Maddie's medication first. The explosion shattered the peace like a fist through a mirror. Light erupted across the horizon, orange and violent, turning night into a hellish noon. The shockwave hit seconds later, a deep boom that Ethan felt in his chest, in his bones. He spun toward the sound, his heart already hammering, and saw the flames. A yacht. A massive, sleek thing that probably cost more than every house in Seabrook combined. It was burning like a Viking funeral pyre half a mile off the coast, black smoke pouring into the sky, flames licking up the white hull with hungry enthusiasm. Ethan's first thought was to call it in. His second thought was that by the time the Coast Guard arrived, whoever was on that boat would be dead. His third thought was of Maddie, 8 years old and sleeping in her bed back home, her heart monitor beeping its steady rhythm beside her pillow. "Turn around," Reason whispered. "Call it in. You have a daughter who needs you." But even as he thought it, his hands were already spinning the wheel, his foot pushing the throttle forward. The Maddie's Hope surged toward the burning yacht, her engine whining in protest. Ethan grabbed his radio. Coast Guard, this is fishing vessel Maddie's Hope. I've got a yacht on fire, approximately half-mile northeast of Seabrook Harbor. Coordinates." He rattled off the numbers, his eyes never leaving the inferno ahead. "I'm moving in to check for survivors. Over." Static crackled, then a voice, professional and urgent. "Maddie's Hope. This is Coast Guard Station Seabrook. We're dispatching rescue now. Do not approach the vessel. Repeat. Do not approach. Over." Ethan hung up the radio. The heat hit him when he was still 50 yards out, a wall of scorching air that made his eyes water. The yacht was listing badly to port, flames consuming everything above deck. The name on the stern was half melted but still visible. Victoria's Dream. Expensive. Probably some tech mogul's weekend toy. He circled once, looking for signs of life, looking for any indication that this wasn't a suicide mission. The smoke was thick enough to choke on, black and oily. The yacht groaned, metal warping in the heat, and Ethan knew it had minutes before it went under. Then he saw her. A flash of movement through a porthole on the main deck, there and gone. But it was enough. Someone was alive in there. "God damn it," Ethan breathed. He killed the engine, let the Maddie's Hope drift closer. Too close. The heat was blistering now, paint bubbling on his boat's hull. He grabbed his emergency kit, first aid, blankets, a flashlight, and pulled his wool cap down low. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The jump from his boat to the yacht's swim platform was maybe 6 feet. Ethan cleared it easy, landing in a crouch as flames roared above him. The deck was hot enough to feel through his boots. Smoke poured from the shattered windows of the main cabin, and somewhere inside something exploded with a sharp crack. "Maddie needs you alive," the voice in his head screamed. "Turn back." But his feet were already moving. The interior was hell. Smoke so thick he couldn't see 3 feet ahead, heat that seared his lungs with every breath. Ethan pulled his collar over his nose and mouth, squinting against the burning air. The yacht was expensive chaos. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, the stink of gasoline and burning plastic. "Hello?" he shouted. His voice was swallowed by the roar of the fire. "Anyone here?" No answer, just the crackle and snap of flames eating through wood and metal. He pushed deeper into the main cabin, staying low where the smoke was thinner. His eyes watered so badly he could barely see. The heat was insane, pressing down on him like a physical weight. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to get out while he still could. Then he found her. She was crumpled against the far wall beneath a collapsed bookshelf, unconscious, dark hair plastered to her face with sweat and soot, blood trickling from a cut above her eyebrow. She wore silk pajamas, cream-colored, expensive, and diamond earrings that caught the firelight like trapped stars. "Hey!" Ethan dropped beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. Pulse. Weak, but there. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. Her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, her skin gray with smoke inhalation. Above them, the ceiling groaned. Flames were eating through the deck above, and Ethan could see the wood beginning to bow, could hear the warning creak of structural failure. No time for gentle. He grabbed her under the arms and hauled her up, slinging her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She was light, too light, all sharp angles and fragile bones. Rich women and their diets. The yacht lurched suddenly, listing harder to port. Ethan stumbled, caught himself against the wall, felt the heat sear through his glove. The woman's head lolled against his back, her breathing ragged. Move. Move now. He ran. Back through the smoke-choked cabin, dodging falling debris. The ceiling collapsed behind him with a roar, flames exploding upward in a rush of superheated air. The heat was unbearable now, his lungs screaming for clean air, his vision going dark at the edges. The swim platform. Just get to the swim platform. Ethan burst out into the open air, gulping oxygen, his eyes streaming. The Maddie's hope was still there, drifting in the waves, blessed and beautiful. He didn't let himself think, just jumped. For a single, weightless second, they were airborne, Ethan and the unconscious woman, suspended above the black water with fire at their backs. Then gravity claimed them, and they hit the deck of his boat hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Ethan rolled, keeping the woman's weight off him, and scrambled to the wheel. His hands were shaking, from adrenaline, from fear, from the sheer stupid impossibility of what he'd just done. The engine turned over on the first try, the most beautiful sound in the world, and the Maddie's hope surged away from the dying yacht. They were 50 yards out when the yacht's fuel tank went up. The explosion was massive, a pillar of fire that turned the night to day. The shockwave rolled across the water, rocking the Maddie's hope, and Ethan threw himself over the woman's body, shielding her from the rain of burning debris. Heat washed over them in waves, and when Ethan finally looked up, the yacht was gone. Nothing left but flames on the water and floating wreckage. He sat back, breathing hard, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. His hands were burned, his lungs felt like he'd inhaled broken glass, and he was pretty sure he'd just used up every scrap of luck he'd ever have. But they were alive. The woman stirred, coughing weakly. Ethan turned to her, pulling his blanket from the emergency kit and wrapping it around her shoulders. Her eyes fluttered open, dark eyes, disoriented and glassy with shock. "You're okay," Ethan said, his voice rough from smoke. "You're safe. Just breathe." She stared at him, her mouth working soundlessly. Then her eyes rolled back and she was out again. In the distance, sirens wailed. The Coast Guard, probably. Ambulances. The whole damn cavalry coming to deal with the aftermath. Ethan looked at the woman, at her expensive pajamas and diamond earrings, at the blood on her face and the soot in her hair. Questions would come. Press, probably. Police. Insurance investigators. Everyone would want to know what happened, how she survived, who pulled her out of the fire. And Ethan couldn't afford questions. Because questions meant attention, and attention meant people looking into his life. And people looking into his life meant Maddie. His phone was buzzing in his pocket. He pulled it out with numb fingers, saw the screen. Mrs. Chen, neighbor. "Hello?" "Ethan, thank God. I heard the explosion, saw the fire. Are you—" "I'm fine," Ethan cut her off. "Is Maddie—" "Still sleeping, sweetie. Her monitor's been steady all night. I just wanted to make sure you were okay out there." Relief made his knees weak. "I'm coming in. Be there in 20 minutes. "Okay, I'll make coffee." Ethan hung up. The Coast Guard cutter was visible now, cutting through the water with its searchlight sweeping the wreckage. In another minute, they'd be here. They'd take the woman, get her to a hospital, and he could slip away, just another fisherman who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. He looked at her one more time. Even unconscious, even covered in soot and blood, there was something striking about her. Strong features, a face that probably commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors. She'd want to thank him, probably. Offer him money, reward, whatever rich people did when someone saved their life. But Ethan couldn't take that risk. Couldn't let the spotlight find him. Couldn't let anyone dig too deep into his life. Because the Harrisons, Maddie's grandparents, were always watching, always looking for any excuse to take his daughter away. Unfit father, they'd said in court, living hand to mouth, barely keeping her in medication. One more strike, one more sign of instability, and they'd have grounds to reopen the custody case. So when the Coast Guard cutter pulled alongside and uniformed men were calling out questions and securing the woman on a stretcher, Ethan gave them the basics. Saw the explosion, moved in, found one survivor, pulled her out. No, he didn't know who she was. No, he didn't need medical attention. Yes, he was fine. "We'll need a statement," the lieutenant said, clipboard in hand. "Sure. I'll come by the station tomorrow. Right now I need to get home. My daughter." Understanding flickered in the man's eyes. Small town. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone knew Ethan was raising Maddie alone. "Go ahead. We know where to find you." Ethan nodded, already turning the Maddie's hope toward home. Behind him, the Coast Guard was loading the woman into their boat, wrapping her in thermal blankets, radioing ahead to the hospital. She'd be fine. Better than fine, probably. Rich people always landed on their feet, and he'd be forgotten by morning. The sun was rising when Ethan tied up at his dock, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He was exhausted, his body screaming from burns and bruises he'd barely registered in the moment. But he forced himself to move, to climb the worn steps to his house, a small, weather-beaten thing perched on the hill overlooking the harbor. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, her round face creased with concern. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Ethan, you look like you went through hell." Something like that. He moved past her, heading straight for Maddie's room. The door was open, and there she was, his whole world, curled up in her twin bed with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. The heart monitor on her nightstand beeped its steady rhythm, the green line rising and falling with each breath. Ethan stood in the doorway and just breathed, just let himself be grateful. "She had a good night," Mrs. Chen said softly behind him. "Slept straight through. I checked her vitals every 2 hours like you showed me." "Thank you." Ethan's voice was rough. "I'll get you that 20. Oh, stop it. You know I don't charge you." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. "But Ethan, what happened out there? The whole harbor's talking about some yacht explosion." "Wrong place, wrong time," Ethan said. The lie came easy. It had to. "Saw the fire, called it in, that's all. Coast Guard handled the rest." Mrs. Chen's eyes were sharp, but she didn't push. "Well, I'm glad you're safe. Maddie needs her daddy." "I know." After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan showered, watching brown water swirl down the drain, soot and blood and the smell of smoke. His hands were blistered, his lungs still aching, but nothing that wouldn't heal. He'd gotten lucky. Impossibly lucky. He dressed in clean clothes and went to make breakfast, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Maddie. Eggs and toast, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. His hands were shaking again as he cracked the eggs, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving him hollow and exhausted. "You could have died," the voice in his head whispered. Maddie could have woken up without a father, but someone else would have died if he'd done nothing. That woman, whoever she was, she'd be ashes in the wreckage right now if Ethan had made the safe choice. He'd never been good at safe choices. "Daddy?" Ethan turned. Maddie stood in the kitchen doorway, her rabbit dragging from one hand, her dark hair a nest around her sleep-soft face. She was so small, so fragile. Had been since she was born with half a heart, the doctor said. 2 surgeries already, and she'd need another soon. Maybe the big one, the one that would either fix everything or... Ethan didn't let himself think about the or. "Hey, baby girl." He crouched down, opening his arms, and she ran into them with the force of a cannonball. "You sleep okay?" "Uh-huh." She pulled back, frowning at his face. You look tired. Just busy night. Caught a bunch of lobsters. Can we have lobster for dinner? Sure. Whatever you want. He'd have to sell most of them to make the mortgage, but he'd keep a couple back. Maddie loved lobster, the way she loved anything special. You hungry now? I'm making eggs. With cheese. Is there any other way? She giggled, and the sound was worth more than all the diamonds on that woman's ears. Ethan made breakfast while Maddie chattered about her dreams. Something about unicorns and flying, and tried not to think about the choice he'd made out on the water. Tried not to think about the woman he'd left behind. The phone started ringing around noon. Ethan let most of the calls go to voicemail. Reporters, he guessed, somehow getting his number. Small-town gossip moved faster than light, and by now everyone knew a local fisherman had been near the yacht explosion. They just didn't know which one. But when Sheriff Brennan called, Ethan picked up. Cole? Ethan, you got a minute? The sheriff's voice was careful. They'd known each other since high school, and Brennan was good people. Fair. Need you to come down to the station, answer some questions about this morning. I already told the Coast Guard everything. I know, but there's some interest in this case. Won't take long, I promise. Interest. That was never good. Give me an hour. I need to drop Maddie at school. She doing okay? Good days and bad days. Today's good. That's something. See you soon. Ethan hung up and closed his eyes. He'd known this was coming. Known he couldn't just disappear into the fog and have everyone forget. But he'd hoped for a little more time before the world came knocking. Maddie was in the living room, watching cartoons with her heart monitor clipped to her shirt. Ethan sat beside her, pulling her into his lap. Hey, sweetheart. I need to go into town for a bit this afternoon. Want to see if Grammy Chen can watch you? Can I come? Not this time. Boring grown-up stuff. She made a face but nodded. Okay, but you have to bring me back a cookie from the bakery. Deal. At the sheriff's station, Ethan sat in a gray interview room that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Sheriff Brennan sat across from him, notepad open, expression neutral. Walk me through it again, Brennan said. So Ethan did. The explosion, the approach, the rescue. He kept it simple, factual, emotionless. Just another day on the water. Brennan took notes, nodding along. When Ethan finished, the sheriff sat back studying him. You know who she is? The woman you pulled out? No idea. Victoria Lane, ring any bells? Ethan shook his head. Tech CEO. Worth about $8 billion, give or take. One of those Silicon Valley types. Apps, software, something. She was up here for some meeting, staying on the yacht. Brennan paused. She's asking for you. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? Woke up this morning at Portland Medical. First thing she did was start asking about her rescuer. Wants to meet you, thank you personally. Brennan's eyes were sharp. Seems like a nice gesture. I don't need thanks. Maybe, but she's pretty insistent. Got people calling my office every hour. Press is going to be all over this once they figure out who you are. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. I don't want press. I don't want attention. I just want to be left alone. Brennan was quiet for a moment, then, the Harrisons putting pressure on you again? Ethan looked away. Of course Brennan knew. Everyone knew. Small town. They're always putting pressure on me. Court date coming up? Review hearing in 6 weeks. They're trying to argue I can't provide adequate care for Maddie. The words tasted bitter. Which is bullshit, but they have lawyers and money and... He stopped himself. I can't afford to give them any ammunition. If they see me on TV playing hero, they'll twist it. Say I'm reckless, that I put myself in danger when I should be thinking about Maddie. That's a reach. They're creative. Ethan met Brennan's eyes. Please. I did what anyone would have done. I don't need recognition for it. I just need to keep my head down and take care of my daughter. The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, closing his notepad. All right, I'll keep your name out of the official reports as long as I can. But Ethan, this woman isn't going to stop looking. People like her, when they want something, they usually get it. Then she'll be disappointed. Ethan left the station and picked up Maddie from Mrs. Chen's house. They spent the afternoon on the docks. Maddie drawing in her sketchbook while Ethan worked on his traps. She drew him mostly, big and strong, pulling lobsters from the sea. Her hero. If only she knew how scared he'd been that morning, how close he'd come to not coming home. That evening, after Maddie was in bed, Ethan sat on his porch with a beer and watched the harbor. The wreckage of the yacht was gone, already towed away for investigation, like it had never been there at all. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with growing dread. "Mr. Cole? This is Jessica Martinez with Boston Herald. I'm doing a story on Victoria Lane's rescue, and I understand you were involved. I'd love to get your perspective. Please call me back at..." Delete. 3 more messages, all reporters. Word was out. Ethan turned off his phone and finished his beer in the darkness. Somewhere in Portland, Victoria Lane was recovering in a hospital bed, asking questions about the man who'd saved her life. And Ethan was here, hoping desperately that she'd forget, that this would all blow over, that he could go back to being invisible. But deep down, he knew. Some things, once started, couldn't be stopped. And Victoria Lane didn't seem like the kind of woman who gave up easily. The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds in thin, sterile slices. Victoria Lane woke to the smell of disinfectant and the steady beep of a heart monitor that wasn't hers, but might as well have been, given how closely they'd been watching her vitals for the past 18 hours. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. Her head pounded with a rhythm that matched the beeping, and when she tried to sit up, every muscle in her body screamed in protest. "Easy." A nurse appeared at her bedside, young and efficient, already adjusting the bed to bring Victoria upright. "You've got smoke inhalation and a concussion. Moving too fast isn't going to help either." Victoria's voice came out as a rasp. "Water!" The nurse handed her a cup with a straw, and Victoria drank like she'd been wandering the desert. The water hurt going down, but it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. When she finished, she looked at the nurse with eyes that had intimidated venture capitalists and board members across 3 continents. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge. Now." "The doctor will be in shortly." "Not the doctor. Whoever investigated the yacht fire. Police, Coast Guard, I don't care. Get them here." The nurse hesitated, caught between professional protocol and the unmistakable force of Victoria's will. The latter won. "I'll see what I can do." 20 minutes later, a Coast Guard lieutenant stood beside Victoria's bed, cap in hand, looking uncomfortable in the fluorescent light. His name tag read Morrison, and he had the weathered face of someone who'd spent too many years staring at the ocean. "Miss Lane, I'm Lieutenant Morrison. I'm glad to see you're recovering." "The man who pulled me out of the yacht." Victoria's voice was still rough, but clear, direct. "I need his name." Morrison shifted his weight. "We're still compiling the report." "Don't." Victoria cut him off with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "I've been dealing with bureaucrats and lawyers since I was 23. I know when someone's stalling. You know who he is. I want his name." The lieutenant's jaw tightened. "Ms. Lane, the individual in question has requested privacy." "I don't care what he requested. He saved my life. I'm not going to hurt him. I'm not going to sue him. I'm going to thank him. Now give me his name, or I'll have my legal team request every document related to this incident under the Freedom of Information Act by lunch." It wasn't a bluff. Morrison knew it wasn't a bluff. He sighed, pulling out a small notepad. "His name is Ethan Cole, local fisherman. He was checking traps when the yacht exploded, moved in to help before we arrived." "Address?" "Ms. Lane, address." Morrison recited it like a man facing a firing squad. Victoria committed every word to memory. "Thank you, Lieutenant. That will be all." After he left, Victoria lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes. Her last clear memory before waking up here was going to bed on the yacht, exhausted from a day of meetings with the main tech initiative. She'd been trying to expand her company's presence on the East Coast, scouting locations for a new development center. The yacht had been borrowed from a business associate. Marcus something, she couldn't remember his last name, and she'd fallen asleep to the gentle rocking of waves. Then nothing, just smoke and fire and strong arms lifting her, carrying her through hell. A face above hers, streaked with soot, eyes intense with focus. A voice saying, You're safe. Just breathe. Ethan Cole. She pulled her phone from the bedside table. Someone had retrieved it from the wreckage, cracked screen but still functional, and opened her email. 300 unread messages. Her assistant, Rebecca, had been busy. Victoria typed quickly. Rebecca. Need full background on Ethan Cole, Seabrook Harbor, Maine. Fisherman. Everything. Employment, family, financials, legal history. I want it in 2 hours. The response came in 30 seconds. Already on it. Heard you were asking. Sending preliminary report now. That was why Victoria paid Rebecca 6 figures. The woman was psychic. The report came through as a PDF, and Victoria read it with the same intensity she brought to quarterly earnings statements. Ethan Cole, 32 years old, widowed 3 years ago, wife died in a car accident. One daughter, Madeline, age 8. Operated a small fishing business, barely solvent, behind on property taxes, medical bills piling up. Victoria scrolled further. There was more. A custody dispute with the child's maternal grandparents, Robert and Catherine Harrison. Wealthy couple from Boston, arguing that Ethan couldn't provide adequate care for Madeline, who had a congenital heart defect. Review hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. Jesus, Victoria muttered. No wonder he'd vanished into the fog. The man was barely keeping his head above water, and the last thing he needed was media attention giving his dead wife's parents more ammunition. But he'd still risked his life to save hers. Victoria's phone rang, her brother David calling from San Francisco. She answered on speaker. You're alive. David's voice was tight with relief and anger in equal measure. Do you have any idea how terrifying it was to get a call that your yacht exploded? I was on a plane before they even confirmed you were okay. I'm fine. You're in a hospital with smoke inhalation and a concussion. That's not fine, Vic. That's the opposite of fine. I've had worse hangovers. This isn't funny. What the hell happened? Victoria gave him the abbreviated version. The fire, the rescue, waking up here. She left out the part about Ethan Cole, about the way she couldn't stop thinking about those moments in his arms, being carried to safety. David would read too much into it. They're saying it was an electrical fire, David said. Something with the yacht's wiring. Could have been worse. It was worse. It would have killed me if not for... She stopped herself. For? The fisherman who pulled me out. Right. I saw the Coast Guard report. Anonymous Good Samaritan. You planning to track him down and throw money at him? Something like that. David was quiet for a moment. Then, Vic, maybe just let this one go. Send a thank you card, make a donation to the local fire department, whatever. But I know that tone in your voice, and it worries me. What tone? The one that means you've decided something and nothing's going to change your mind. The same tone you had before you quit Stanford to start the company. Before you mortgaged your apartment to make payroll in year 2. Before you... I get it. I'm stubborn. You're obsessive. There's a difference. David's voice softened. Just be careful, okay? You almost died. Maybe take a few days to process that before you go charging after some guy who clearly doesn't want to be found. He saved my life, David. I know, and I'm grateful, but that doesn't mean you owe him anything beyond basic gratitude. Don't make this into one of your projects. After they hung up, Victoria stared at the ceiling and tried to convince herself that David was right, that she should just send flowers and a thank you note and move on with her life. She had a company to run, investors to appease, a product launch in 3 weeks that was already behind schedule. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw those flames. Felt the heat, the terror, the absolute certainty that she was going to die. And then those arms, lifting her, carrying her to safety. A stranger who'd risked everything for someone he didn't know. She couldn't just let that go. The doctors released her 2 days later with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. Victoria nodded along, already planning her next move. She'd rented a suite at the Harbor View Inn in Seabrook, the town's only hotel that didn't look like it was held together with duct tape and prayers. And that's where she directed her driver. Seabrook Harbor was exactly what she'd expected. A tired fishing village clinging to the Maine coast like a barnacle to a ship's hull. Main Street was 6 blocks of weathered storefronts, half of them vacant. The harbor itself was functional but worn, with fishing boats that had seen better decades. The kind of place that had been bypassed by progress, and didn't seem particularly upset about it. The Harbor View Inn was better than expected, a restored Victorian with decent Wi-Fi, and a restaurant that apparently served the best clam chowder in Maine. Victoria checked in under an assumed name, ignoring the desk clerk's double take of recognition, and went straight to her room. From her window, she could see the harbor, and if she looked carefully, she could make out a small house on the hill, paint peeling, yard overgrown. According to Rebecca's report, that was where Ethan Cole lived with his daughter. Victoria stood at that window for a long time, watching the fishing boats come and go, trying to figure out her next move. She'd built a tech empire from nothing, had negotiated with CEOs and senators and foreign ministers, but approaching a fisherman who'd made it clear he wanted to be left alone? That required a different kind of strategy. Her phone buzzed. Rebecca, ever efficient. Media requests are piling up. Everyone wants to interview you about the rescue. I've been deflecting, but CNN is getting pushy. Victoria typed back. Keep deflecting. No interviews about the incident. Standard statement about being grateful to first responders and moving forward. They want the hero angle, the mysterious rescuer who disappeared. Then they'll be disappointed. She wasn't going to feed the media circus, not when it would make Ethan Cole's life harder. That evening, Victoria went down to the inn's restaurant for dinner. The place was small but warm, with exposed beams and nautical decorations that managed to avoid being too kitschy. She sat at a corner table with her laptop, catching up on email while she waited for her food. "You're her, aren't you?" Victoria looked up. The waitress was about 60, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that were sharp with intelligence and curiosity. Her name tag read Diane. "I'm sorry?" "The woman from the yacht, Victoria Lane." Diane set down a basket of bread. "Saw your picture on the news. They said you were staying in Portland, but I figured someone like you would want somewhere quieter to recover. There was no point denying it. That obvious? Small town. We noticed strangers." Diane's expression softened. "I'm glad you're okay. That was a hell of a thing, what happened." "It was. And I heard Ethan Cole pulled you out. That true?" Victoria's hand tightened on her water glass. "You know him?" "Everyone knows everyone here. Ethan's good people. Quiet, keeps to himself, but good people. He's had a rough few years." "His wife?" Diane nodded, sliding into the seat across from Victoria without asking permission. The restaurant was nearly empty anyway. "Sarah, sweet girl. They were high school sweethearts, got married young. She died in a car accident when Maddie was 5. Drunk driver crossed the center line." Her voice went hard. "Ethan's been raising that little girl alone ever since, and doing a damn fine job of it, despite what her grandparents say. They're trying to take custody. They've been trying since Sarah died. The Harrisons never approved of Ethan, thought Sarah married beneath her. They've got money, connections, and they're convinced Maddie would be better off with them in Boston." Diane's jaw set. "But Maddie loves her daddy, and Ethan would walk through fire for that child." Victoria thought about the man who'd literally walked through fire to save her. "He seems like the type." "So what are you doing here, Ms. Lane?" Diane's eyes were knowing. "If you wanted to thank him, you could have sent a check. Why come all the way to Seabrook?" It was a fair question. Victoria didn't have a good answer. "I'm not sure yet." "Well, word of advice, Ethan doesn't want attention, never has. He's not going to want thanks or rewards or whatever else you're planning. He just wants to raise his daughter in peace." "Then maybe people should let him." Diane studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Maybe they should." She stood up, patting Victoria's shoulder. "Clam chowder's excellent tonight. And if you happen to go for a walk along the docks tomorrow morning, around 6, you might run into certain fishermen checking their boats." Victoria watched her walk away, then smiled into her wine glass. Small towns, everyone in everyone's business, but not without purpose. She spent the evening working, trying to focus on quarterly projections and product development timelines. But her mind kept drifting to the house on the hill, to the single father fighting to keep his daughter, to the man who'd saved her life and asked for nothing in return. At midnight, she closed her laptop and stared at the darkness beyond her window. Tomorrow she'd go to the docks. She'd see Ethan Cole again, face to face. And then, she didn't know. She'd built her career on having a plan for everything, but this was uncharted territory. Some things couldn't be solved with spreadsheets and strategy sessions. Some things required showing up and seeing what happened. The alarm went off at 5:30. Victoria dressed in jeans and a cashmere sweater, practical boots, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup beyond the basics. She looked more like a tourist than a tech CEO, which was exactly the point. The harbor was quiet at this hour, wrapped in fog that turned everything soft and gray. A few boats were already heading out, their running lights ghostly in the mist. Victoria walked along the main dock, hands in her pockets, trying to look casual despite the way her heart was hammering. She spotted the Maddie's Hope at the far end, a small, well-maintained fishing boat with faded blue paint. And there, loading supplies onto the deck, was Ethan Cole. He looked different in daylight. Older than his 32 years, with lines around his eyes that spoke of worry and long hours. His hair was dark and needed a cut, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He moved with the easy competence of someone who'd been working boats his whole life, every motion economical and precise. Victoria approached slowly, her boots quiet on the wooden planks. She was 10 feet away when he sensed her presence and looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Recognition flickered across Ethan's face, followed quickly by something that looked like dread. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, his expression closing off. "Ms. Lane." "Mr. Cole." Victoria stopped at the edge of his boat, not quite close enough to board without invitation. "I was hoping we could talk." "There's nothing to talk about." His voice was flat, guarded. "You're alive. I'm glad. That's all there is to it. You saved my life. I did what anyone would have done." "That's not true, and you know it." Victoria took a step closer. "The Coast Guard told me the yacht was fully engulfed when you went in. You could have died." Ethan's jaw tightened. "But I didn't, and neither did you. So let's just leave it at that." "I can't." "Why not?" Frustration edged into his voice. "What do you want from me? Money? I don't have any. A photo op? I don't want one. A news interview so you can tell the world how brave I was? That's the last thing I need. I don't want any of that." "Then what?" Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. What did she want? To thank him, yes. To understand why he'd run. To see if the man she'd glimpsed in the smoke and fire was real or just a product of trauma and desperation. "I want to know why you disappeared," she said finally. "The Coast Guard said you left before they could get your full statement. The sheriff said you asked him to keep your name out of the reports. You saved my life, and then vanished like you'd done something wrong." Ethan looked away, out at the gray water. "I have my reasons." "Your daughter." His head snapped back toward her, eyes sharp with alarm. "How do you—" "I did my research. It's what I do." Victoria kept her voice gentle. "I know about Maddie, about the custody case, about why you can't afford attention right now. Then you understand why I need you to leave." Ethan's voice was tight. "I appreciate that you came all this way, I really do, but the best thing you can do for me is forget I exist and go back to your life." "What if I don't want to?" "Doesn't matter what you want. This is my life, my daughter. I'm not going to risk her because some billionaire has a savior complex." The words should have stung. Instead, Victoria found herself almost smiling. "Is that what you think this is?" "Isn't it?" Ethan crossed his arms. "Rich person almost dies, wants to feel grateful, finds the poor local who saved them and tries to fix their life. I've seen this movie. It doesn't end well for people like me. People like you. Yeah, people who can't afford your kind of help." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying him. He was defensive, scared, protecting something precious. She understood that. She'd spent her career protecting her company from people who wanted to consume it, change it, make it into something it wasn't. "You're right," she said finally. "I don't understand your life. I don't understand what it's like to raise a child alone, to fight for custody, to work every day just to stay afloat. But I understand what it's like to almost die, and I understand what it's like to owe someone a debt you can't repay. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. My life, my future. Every moment I'm going to have from now on exists because you were brave enough to risk yours." Victoria took a breath. So maybe I do have a savior complex. Maybe I'm trying to fix something, but not your life. Mine. Because I can't go back to running my company and making my deals and pretending nothing happened when I know there's a man in Maine who gave me a second chance and is getting nothing in return. Ethan stared at her, and for a moment the walls came down. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear, the weight of carrying too much alone. Then he looked away again. I don't need saving. Maybe not. But your daughter needs surgery. Victoria had read the medical reports, had seen the bills. And that costs money you don't have. That's none of your business. It became my business when you carried me out of a burning yacht. No. Ethan's voice was firm. It didn't. You don't get to buy your way into my life just because you feel guilty about being alive. Maddie and I, we're doing fine. We'll figure out the surgery when the time comes. We always do. And when her grandparents use your financial situation to take her away, that won't happen. Are you sure? Victoria pressed. Because from what I read, they have a pretty strong case. Wealthy, stable, able to provide top-tier medical care without worrying about money. What do you have? A fishing boat and a mortgage you can't pay. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. You need to leave. Now. I'm not trying to hurt you. You're trying to help, which is worse. Because your help comes with strings, with attention, with all the things that will destroy my case. The Harrisons are looking for any excuse to prove I'm unfit. If they see you here, if they find out about the rescue, they'll twist it into evidence that I'm reckless, that I put myself in danger instead of thinking about Maddie. So please, his voice cracked slightly, just go back to your world and let me stay in mine. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she could help without destroying his life, that money and influence could solve these problems if he'd just let her. But she saw the desperation in his face, the fierce protectiveness of a father willing to sacrifice pride and help and everything else to keep his child safe. She understood that kind of love. Her parents had loved her and David that way, had worked themselves to exhaustion to give them opportunities, had died young from the stress of it, leaving Victoria to raise her teenage brother while building a company from scratch. Some debts couldn't be repaid with money. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go. Relief flickered across Ethan's face, followed by something that might have been regret. Thank you. Victoria nodded and turned to leave. She'd made it 5 steps when she stopped, looking back over her shoulder. Just so you know, I looked into the yacht fire. The preliminary report says it was electrical, a fault in the wiring. But I'm having my people dig deeper. If someone tampered with that yacht, if this wasn't an accident, I'll find out. And if finding out puts you in any danger or draws attention you don't want, I'll make it go away. That's not charity. That's just tying up loose ends. Ethan didn't respond, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly. Victoria walked back down the dock, past the fishing boats and their weathered crews, past the early morning routine of a harbor waking up. She didn't look back, didn't let herself second-guess the decision to walk away. But as she returned to the inn, climbing the stairs to her suite, she couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation wasn't finished, that she and Ethan Cole were connected now by more than just a rescue, by more than simple gratitude. She'd respected his wishes. She'd walked away. But she hadn't said forever. The next week passed in a strange limbo. Victoria stayed in Seabrook, ostensibly to recover and work remotely, but really because she couldn't bring herself to leave. She told herself it was due diligence, waiting for the fire investigation to conclude, making sure there were no legal complications. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. She'd seen something in Ethan Cole, something beyond the obvious heroism, beyond the struggling single father trying to hold his world together. She'd seen the kind of integrity that didn't bend even when it should, the kind of stubbornness that would choose pride over survival if that's what it took to keep his daughter safe. Victoria knew that kind of stubbornness. She'd built her company on it. She worked from the inn's restaurant, taking meetings via video call and reviewing reports on her laptop. Rebecca had wanted her back in San Francisco, but Victoria had overruled her. The company could survive without her for a few more days. The world wouldn't end. And Seabrook was growing on her. The pace was different here, slower. People smiled when they passed on the street, asked how she was doing even though they barely knew her. Diane, the waitress, had taken to bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it, without being asked. The inn's owner, Tom, had showed her the best walking trails along the coast. It was strange and unsettling and oddly peaceful. On the fifth day, Victoria was working through a supply chain issue with her operations manager when she heard a child's voice. "Miss? Excuse me, miss?" Victoria looked up from her laptop. A little girl stood beside her table, 8 years old, dark hair in 2 braids, wearing a school uniform that had seen better days. Her backpack was covered in hand-drawn stickers, and she clutched a piece of paper in her small hands. Maddie Cole. It had to be. "Hi there," Victoria said, closing her laptop. "Can I help you?" The girl nodded seriously. "You're the lady from the yacht, the one my daddy saved." Victoria's heart clenched. "I am." "He won't tell me about it. Says it wasn't important." Maddie climbed into the chair across from Victoria without asking, her legs swinging above the floor. "But I heard people talking at school. They said there was an explosion and fire and everything. They said my daddy's a hero." "He is. I know." Maddie said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. "He's always been my hero, but he doesn't like when people say it out loud. Makes him uncomfortable." Victoria found herself smiling. "Your dad sounds like a modest guy." "He's the best daddy in the whole world." Maddie unfolded the paper she'd been holding, smoothing it out on the table. It was a drawing, childish but detailed, done in crayon and marker. It showed a boat on fire, flames drawn in furious orange and red, and a stick figure carrying another stick figure to safety. At the bottom, in careful block letters, "My daddy, the hero." "I drew this," Maddie said. "For you. Because you're probably really grateful he saved you, right?" "More grateful than I can say." "That's what I thought." Maddie pushed the drawing across the table. "You can keep it, to remember." Victoria took the drawing with careful hands, feeling something twist in her chest. "Thank you. This is beautiful. My art teacher says I'm really good at people." Maddie tilted her head, studying Victoria with dark eyes that were too wise for 8 years old. "Are you rich?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Victoria almost laughed. "Yes, I am." "Like really, really rich? Like private jet and mansion rich?" "Something like that." Maddie considered this. "My grandparents are rich too, but they're not very nice about it. They think money makes them better than other people." "It doesn't." "I know. That's what my daddy says." Maddie swung her legs, casual, but her eyes were sharp. "He also says we're doing fine, that we don't need help from anyone. But I heard him crying last night. After I went to bed. He was on the phone with someone about bills." Victoria's chest tightened. "Maddie, I'm not supposed to know," the girl continued, matter of fact. "But our house is small and I'm good at being quiet. I know we're behind on the mortgage. I know I need another surgery and it costs a lot. I know my grandparents want to take me away." Her voice wavered slightly on the last part. "But I don't want to go. I want to stay with my daddy." "Of course you do." "So I was thinking," Maddie leaned forward conspiratorial, "maybe you could help? Not like charity or whatever, but like, I don't know, give my daddy a job? Or hire his boat for something? He's really good at fishing, the best in Seabrook." Victoria looked at this small, brave girl with her handmade drawing and her fierce love for her father, and felt something crack open inside her chest. She'd spent years building walls, protecting herself from the vulnerability that came with caring too much. But this child, with her honesty and her hope, had just walked right through every defense. "Maddie," Victoria said gently, "I already tried to help. Your dad said no. He's stubborn." "I noticed. But that's just because he's scared. Not of the fire or the rescue or anything like that. He's scared of losing me." Maddie's eyes were bright. "If you really want to help, you can't make it seem like help. You have to make it seem like you're the one who needs something. Does that make sense?" Victoria stared at this 8-year-old with the strategic mind of a Fortune 500 CEO. "That makes perfect sense." "Good." Maddie hopped down from the chair, shouldering her backpack. "I have to go. Mrs. Chen picks me up after school and she'll worry if I'm late. But thank you for talking to me. And for letting my daddy save you. He needed to be a hero. It's been a long time since he felt like one." She was gone before Victoria could respond, skipping out of the restaurant with the carefree energy of childhood. But the drawing remained on the table, a reminder of what was at stake. Victoria picked it up, studying the careful crayon lines, the stick figures that somehow conveyed emotion despite their simplicity. A father saving a stranger, a child's pride in her hero. She pulled out her phone and called Rebecca. "I need you to research something," Victoria said when her assistant answered. "Fishing operations in Maine. Specifically, I want to know if there's a market for sustainable, locally sourced seafood in high-end restaurants. And I want to know how much it would cost to establish a supply contract with a small, independent operator." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "This is about the fishermen. This is about good business. Vic, just do the research. I'll explain later." After she hung up, Victoria sat back and looked out the window at the harbor. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole was checking his traps, trying to make enough money to keep his world from falling apart. He'd said no to help, to charity, to anything that smelled like pity. But what if it wasn't charity? What if it was just business? Victoria smiled, the same smile that had unnerved competitors and delighted investors for the past decade. The smile that meant she'd found an angle, a solution, a way forward that no one else had seen coming. Ethan Cole had saved her life. Now she was going to return the favor, whether he wanted her to or not. Rebecca's research came back within 48 hours, thorough as always. The sustainable seafood market was booming, with high-end restaurants in New York, Boston, and San Francisco paying premium prices for locally sourced, traceable product. The problem was supply chain. Most small operators couldn't meet the volume demands or handle the logistics of shipping live product across the country. But what if someone could? Victoria spent the next 3 days on the phone with restaurant owners, seafood distributors, and logistics companies. She didn't mention Ethan Cole by name, didn't hint at her real motivation. She simply asked questions, gathered data, built a picture of what was possible. By the end of the week, she had a proposal. Not charity, not a handout, a legitimate business opportunity that would benefit everyone involved. The hard part would be getting Ethan to listen. She found him at the marina on a Thursday afternoon, working on his boat's engine with grease-stained hands and a focused expression. The sky was gray with incoming weather, and the wind carried the smell of rain and seaweed. Victoria approached slowly, giving him time to notice her presence. Ethan looked up, and something complicated crossed his face. Frustration, resignation, and maybe the smallest hint of something else. "I thought you left." "I've been working." "From Seabrook?" "Turns out I can run my company from anywhere with decent Wi-Fi." Victoria stopped at the edge of the dock, hands in her jacket pockets. "Can we talk?" "We already did. Nothing's changed." "Actually, something has. I have a business proposition." Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. His guard was up immediately. "I'm not interested in your money." "Good, because I'm not offering any. I'm offering a contract." Victoria pulled out her phone, pulled up the proposal Rebecca had drafted. "I've been talking to restaurants in major cities, places that pay premium prices for sustainable, traceable seafood. They want local fishermen, small operators who can guarantee quality and provenance. Right now they're paying middlemen who are maybe paying the actual fishermen a fraction of what the product is worth." Ethan crossed his arms, suspicious but listening. "What if we cut out the middlemen?" Victoria continued. "What if a small operator like you could sell directly to these restaurants at fair market prices? You'd handle the fishing, I'd handle the logistics and distribution through my company's existing shipping network. 50-50 split on the profits after costs." "Why would you do that?" "Because it's good business. My company has the infrastructure, the connections, the brand recognition, but we don't have the product. You have the product, the expertise, the local knowledge. It's a partnership, not charity." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. "And if I say no? Then I'll find another fisherman. There are plenty in Seabrook who'd jump at this opportunity." Victoria met his eyes. "But I'd rather work with you. You're the best fisherman in this harbor. Everyone says so, and I trust you." "You don't know me. I know you risked your life for a stranger. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The wind picked up, carrying the first drops of rain. Ethan looked out at the water, at his boat, at the harbor that had been his whole world for 32 years. Victoria could see the war happening behind his eyes. Pride versus practicality, suspicion versus hope. This isn't because of the rescue, he said finally. You're not doing this out of gratitude. I'm doing this because it makes financial sense. The rescue just gave me the idea. Not entirely true, but close enough. Look, I'm going to set up this distribution network regardless. I've already started making calls, establishing relationships. The question is whether you want to be part of it or whether I give the opportunity to someone else. Ethan turned back to her, searching her face for deception. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because his shoulders dropped slightly. I need to think about it. Of course. Take your time. Victoria handed him a business card with her direct number. But Ethan, this is real. I'm not trying to buy my way into your life or solve your problems. I'm offering you a job because you're good at what you do, and I need someone good. He took the card, turning it over in his fingers. I'll call you. That's all I ask. Victoria walked away before he could say anything else, before the moment could turn awkward or complicated. She'd made her offer. The rest was up to him. Back at the inn, she found Diane waiting with a pot of coffee and a knowing smile. Heard you've been making calls about the fishing business, the waitress said, pouring 2 cups without asking. Word travels fast in a small town. I'm starting to realize that. Ethan know what you're doing? I just told him. He's thinking about it. Diane settled into the chair across from Victoria, cupping her mug with both hands. You know he's going to say yes, right? Not because he wants to, but because he needs to. That man's been drowning slowly for 3 years, and he's too proud to ask for a life preserver. You're offering him one disguised as a business deal. It is a business deal. Sure it is. Diane's smile was gentle. And I'm the Queen of England. Look, I'm not judging. What you're doing is kind. But don't expect Ethan to make it easy. He's been burned by people with good intentions before. The grandparents, among others. After Sarah died, everyone in town wanted to help, brought casseroles, offered to watch Maddie, tried to give him money. He turned it all down, said he didn't need pity. Diane shook her head. Some people are too proud for their own good. I'm familiar with the type. I bet you are. Diane studied her over the rim of her coffee cup. You're not what I expected, you know. When I heard a billionaire was staying in town, I figured you'd be all designer clothes and entitled attitude. But you're real. Victoria laughed, surprised. I'm not sure anyone's ever called me real before. Well, you are. And Maddie likes you. That girl's a good judge of character. She stopped by earlier, told me all about the drawing she gave you. She's a remarkable kid. She is, and she's terrified of losing her father. Diane's expression grew serious. Those grandparents, the Harrisons, they're not bad people exactly. They love their daughter, and they want to protect their granddaughter, but they don't understand Maddie. Don't understand that taking her away from Ethan would destroy her, even if they could give her every material advantage in the world. Love isn't a material advantage. No, it's not. Diane stood, refilling their cups. The custody hearing is in 4 weeks. If Ethan doesn't have his financial situation sorted by then, he's going to lose. The Harrisons have been building their case for months. Medical bills, missed payments, that roof that needs replacing. Every little thing they can use to prove he's struggling. Victoria's hands tightened around her mug. 4 weeks. That's all the time they had. What happens if he loses? Maddie goes to Boston. Big house, private schools, top medical care, and a little girl's heart breaks in ways that money can't fix. Diane's voice was soft. I've known Ethan since he was Maddie's age. He's a good man, a good father. But sometimes being good isn't enough. Sometimes you need help, whether you want it or not. After Diane left, Victoria sat alone with her coffee and her thoughts. 4 weeks to turn around a man's entire financial situation. 4 weeks to make sure a little girl didn't lose her hero. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like a deadline. Victoria had built a billion-dollar company by meeting impossible deadlines. This was just one more. Ethan called 3 days later. Victoria was in the middle of a video conference with her development team when her phone rang, displaying his number. She held up a finger to the screen. Give me 5 minutes. We'll pick this up after lunch. She ended the call and answered Ethan. Hi. I want to see the contract. His voice was careful, guarded. The actual terms, not just a pitch. If I'm going to do this, I need to know exactly what I'm agreeing to. Of course, I can have my lawyer send it over. No, I want you to explain it in person. Tonight, if you're free. Victoria glanced at her calendar, at the stack of meetings and calls that Rebecca had scheduled. Then she deleted all of them. I'm free. Where? My place. 7 o'clock. Maddie will be asleep by then. We can talk without interruption. I'll be there. After they hung up, Victoria sat back and stared at her laptop screen. Ethan was inviting her to his home. It was a small thing, maybe, but it felt significant, like he was opening a door he'd kept firmly locked since their first conversation. She spent the afternoon preparing, pulling together the contract terms, the financial projections, the market research. Rebecca had done excellent work. As always, the proposal was solid, legitimate, profitable for both parties. There was no charity here, no hidden agenda, just good business. But Victoria knew that Ethan would look for the catch, would scrutinize every clause, every term, searching for the place where her gratitude masqueraded as opportunity. She'd have to prove him wrong. At 6:45, Victoria drove up the hill to Ethan's house. It was smaller than she'd expected, a two-bedroom cottage that had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the yard was more weeds than grass. But there were flower boxes under the windows, empty now in late fall, and a small vegetable garden that looked carefully tended. It was a home, not a showpiece, not an investment, a place where a father and daughter built their life together. Victoria knocked softly. Footsteps, then the door opened. Ethan stood there in jeans and a flannel shirt, his hair damp from a recent shower, his feet bare. He looked more relaxed than she'd seen him, but still guarded. Come in. The interior was clean but cluttered in the way homes with children always were. School papers on the fridge, toys in the corner, a heart monitor charging on the kitchen counter. The furniture was old but comfortable, and everywhere Victoria looked, she saw evidence of Maddie, drawings taped to the walls, photos on every surface, a pink backpack hanging by the door. Coffee? Ethan asked. Please. He poured 2 mugs while Victoria settled at the small kitchen table. The house smelled like dinner, something with tomato sauce and garlic, and underneath that the faint scent of the sea that seemed to cling to everything in Seabrook. Ethan sat across from her, pushing 1 mug across the table. Okay, let's hear it. Victoria pulled out the contract, laying it flat between them. For the next hour, she walked him through every clause, every term, every financial projection. She explained how the distribution would work, how payment would be processed, how quality control would be maintained. She showed him the letters of intent from 3 restaurants in Boston, 2 in New York, 1 in San Francisco, all willing to pay premium prices for guaranteed sustainable seafood. Ethan listened in silence, reading every page carefully, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, he sat back and crossed his arms. This seems too good to be true. It's not. It's just business that no one's bothered to organize properly. And you're offering me 50% of profits. After costs, yes. You're doing the hard work, the fishing, the quality control, the early morning runs. I'm just providing distribution and marketing. Just. Ethan smiled without humor. You make it sound simple, but you're putting up all the infrastructure, all the capital risk. If this fails, you lose money. I lose nothing. If it fails, we both lose, but it won't fail. The market's there, the demand's there. We just need the supply. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. There's a non-compete clause here. It says I can't enter into similar agreements with other distributors for 5 years. Standard protection. I'm investing time and money into building this network. I need to know you won't take the relationships I've established and cut me out once the operation is profitable. And if I want out before 5 years, then we negotiate. I'm not trying to trap you, Ethan. I'm trying to build something sustainable. Victoria leaned forward. Look, I get why you're suspicious. Rich person sweeps into town, offers salvation. Usually there's a catch. But I promise you, this is exactly what it looks like. A business deal between 2 people who both benefit. Why? The question came out raw, honest. Why go to all this trouble? You could find 100 fishermen to work with. Why me? Victoria met his eyes. Because you saved my life. And because your daughter drew me a picture and told me her dad was a hero. And because I've spent the last 10 years building a company at the expense of everything else, and I'm tired of only caring about profit margins and stock prices. This, she gestured at the contract, this is something real, something that matters beyond quarterly earnings. Ethan stared at her, and for the first time she saw the walls crack, saw the exhaustion and fear and desperate hope underneath. If I do this, if I sign this contract, the Harrisons will find out. They'll say it's suspicious that you're paying me off as a thank you for the rescue. Let them. It's a legitimate business arrangement. I have the documentation to prove it. They have lawyers who can make anything look suspicious. So do I. Better ones. Victoria's voice was firm. Ethan, I've been in boardrooms with people who'd eat the Harrisons for breakfast. If they try to use this against you in court, I'll testify. I'll bring financial experts, market analysts, restaurant owners, anyone and everyone who can verify that this is real business, not charity. You'd do that? In a heartbeat. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. The last of his defenses crumbling, leaving behind a man who'd been carrying too much for too long. I can't afford to lose Maddie. She's everything, my whole world. If this goes wrong, if the Harrisons win, they won't. Victoria reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. 5 minutes with Maddie can see how much she loves you, how happy she is. The Harrisons have money, yes, but you have something more important. You have her heart. Ethan's fingers tightened around hers, just for a moment. Then he pulled back, clearing his throat. Okay, I need to read through this one more time, maybe have someone look at it. Of course. Take it to a lawyer if you want. I'll pay the consultation fee. I can pay my own. He stopped himself, almost smiled. Right. Pride. I'm working on it. Take your time. No pressure. But Ethan, I meant what I said. This is real, and I think it could be good for both of us. She left shortly after, driving back down the hill with the lights of Seabrook Harbor spreading below her like fallen stars. Her hand still tingled where she'd touched his, and she told herself it was just the adrenaline of a successful pitch, the satisfaction of a deal coming together. But she knew better. Something was happening here, something beyond business, beyond gratitude, beyond the simple transaction of saving and being saved. She was starting to care about Ethan Cole, not as a debt to be repaid, not as a project to be fixed, but as a man. Complicated, stubborn, fiercely protective, and more alone than he wanted to admit. It was dangerous territory. Victoria had built walls around her heart the same way she'd built her company, carefully, strategically, with clear boundaries and exit strategies. Getting emotionally involved with a struggling single father in a small Maine town wasn't part of any plan. But then again, neither was almost dying in a yacht fire. Sometimes life didn't follow the plan. Ethan called 2 days later. His voice was steady when he said, I'm in. Where do I sign? The contracts were finalized within a week. Victoria's legal team handled the paperwork with their usual efficiency, and by the following Monday, Ethan Cole was officially a supplier for Lane Enterprises' Sustainable Seafood Division, a division that Victoria had created specifically for this purpose, though she'd never admit that to him. The first shipment went out on a Wednesday. Ethan had caught lobster, cod, and sea scallops, all packed carefully with ice and shipped overnight to 3 restaurants in Boston. Victoria monitored every step personally, making sure the logistics were flawless, that the product arrived in perfect condition. The restaurants loved it. All 3 placed orders for the following week, increased quantities. Ethan called her that evening, and she could hear the cautious excitement in his voice. They want more. I told you, the market's there. I'm going to need to expand my operation, maybe bring on another boat, hire some help. Do it. I'll adjust the contract to accommodate increased volume. There was a pause, then softer. Thank you, Victoria. It was the first time he'd used her first name. The sound of it, rough and honest in his voice, made something warm bloom in her chest. You're welcome, Ethan. After that, things moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, Ethan had hired 2 part-time crew members and established relationships with 4 other local fishermen who could supplement his catch when demand exceeded his capacity. Victoria connected him with a packaging facility in Portland that could handle the increased volume, and the orders kept coming in. The money started flowing. Not a fortune, but steady, reliable income that was more than Ethan had seen in years. He paid off his back property taxes, caught up on his mortgage, scheduled Maddie's surgery with a pediatric cardiac specialist in Boston. And slowly, carefully, something else started to grow between them. Victoria found excuses to stay in Seabrook. She told herself it was for the business, that she needed to be hands-on during the startup phase. But really, it was for the quiet mornings at the harbor, watching Ethan and his crew load their boats, for the dinners at the inn where Diane would join her and share town gossip, for the occasional afternoon when Maddie would stop by after school full of stories about her day. One Saturday, 3 weeks after the contract was signed, Victoria was working at her usual table in the inn's restaurant when Maddie appeared beside her, breathless and excited. "Miss Victoria, my daddy says the surgery is scheduled. I'm going to get my heart fixed." Victoria looked up from her laptop, unable to stop herself from smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "That's wonderful news, Maddie. It's in 2 weeks. Daddy says it's a big surgery, but the doctor is really good and everything's going to be fine." Maddie bounced on her toes. "And guess what? Daddy says after I recover, maybe we can get a puppy. I've always wanted a puppy, but we couldn't afford it before. But now maybe we can." The casual mention of before and now hit Victoria harder than she'd expected. This was real. The business, the income, the stability. It was actually changing their lives. "A puppy sounds perfect," Victoria said. "What kind?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a golden retriever? Or a beagle? Or one from the shelter. Daddy says shelter dogs need love the most." Maddie climbed into the chair across from Victoria, as had become her habit. "Are you coming to the surgery? Daddy said people can visit at the hospital." Victoria hesitated. She'd been careful not to intrude too much into their personal lives, to maintain the professional distance that would protect them both if things went wrong, but the hope in Maddie's eyes was impossible to resist. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd like that." "He will. He talks about you sometimes, says you're helping a lot with the business." Maddie's expression turned sly, too knowing for 8 years old. "I think he likes you." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "We're business partners, sweetie." "Uh-huh." That's what Daddy says too, but Mrs. Chen says business partners don't smile like that when they talk about each other. Maddie grinned. She says Daddy's been happier lately, less worried. She thinks it's because of you. It's because of the business doing well. Maybe. Maddie didn't sound convinced. Or maybe it's because he finally has someone he can talk to, someone who understands the hard stuff. Before Victoria could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Maddie, I told you to wait outside." He stopped when he saw Victoria. "Sorry. She got away from me." "It's fine. She was just telling me about the surgery." Victoria smiled. "Congratulations. You must be relieved." Relieved doesn't begin to cover it. Ethan's expression was open in a way she'd never seen before, all the careful walls temporarily down. "The doctor says it should fix the majority of her heart issues. She'll still need regular checkups, but no more emergency midnight runs to the hospital, no more constant fear that—" He stopped himself, clearly not wanting to voice the thought in front of his daughter. "It's wonderful news," Victoria said softly. "It is. And it's because—" Ethan paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because of the business. The contract. I wanted to thank you for that, for making it possible. You're doing the work. I'm just facilitating distribution." "Right, distribution." Ethan's smile was small but genuine. "Look, I know Maddie probably invited you to the hospital, and you don't have to come. I know you're busy with your company." "I'd like to come," Victoria interrupted. "If that's okay." Something passed between them then, unspoken but understood. An acknowledgement that this had become more than business, more than gratitude. That somewhere along the way, between contracts and deliveries and casual conversations, they'd become something close to friends, and maybe, possibly, the potential for something more. "Okay," Ethan said. "Yeah, that would be okay." "Yay!" Maddie bounced out of her chair, grabbing her father's hand. "Can we get ice cream now? You promised." I promised if you didn't run off. Which you did. But I found Miss Victoria. That's not running off, that's networking. You're always saying networking is important for business. Ethan laughed, a sound Victoria realized she'd never heard from him before. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger, lighter. You're going to be a terror when you're a teenager, you know that? Daddy, I'm 8. I'm already a terror. Fair point. Ethan glanced at Victoria. You want to join us? For ice cream? It's the least I can do after my daughter ambushed you during work. Victoria should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept things professional. But Maddie was looking at her with those hopeful eyes, and Ethan's smile was warm and genuine, and suddenly spending an afternoon in an office chair felt like the last thing Victoria wanted to do. I'd love to. They walked to the ice cream shop on Main Street, Maddie chattering between them about school and friends and the book she was reading. The October air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the harbor sparkled under pale sunshine. Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years, just walking and listening, being present in a moment instead of always planning 3 steps ahead. At the shop, Maddie ordered a triple scoop with hot fudge and sprinkles, while Ethan got plain vanilla and Victoria chose chocolate. They sat at a small table outside, bundled in jackets, and watched the boats in the harbor. This is nice, Victoria said, surprising herself with the honesty. Ethan glanced at her. Yeah, it is. Do you ever think about leaving? About taking Maddie somewhere bigger? Somewhere with more opportunities? Sometimes. Sarah used to talk about it, moving to Boston maybe, or Portland, somewhere Maddie could get better medical care, better schools. Ethan's voice went quiet. But this is home. It's small and it's not perfect, but it's ours. And I think Maddie's happier here than she would be in some suburb, surrounded by people who don't know her. Victoria understood that. She'd grown up in a small town herself, before scholarships and ambition had pulled her toward bigger things. There was something about knowing your neighbors, about being part of a community that money couldn't buy. She's lucky to have you, Victoria said. A lot of parents would have taken the easy route. Let the grandparents with their money and resources take over. That wouldn't be luck for Maddie. That would be tragedy. Ethan's jaw tightened. The Harrisons love her. I don't doubt that. But they don't see her. They see Sarah, their daughter, who they lost. They want to preserve her memory by molding Maddie into some perfect version of what they think Sarah should have been. But Maddie's not Sarah. She's herself. Wild and curious and so damn brave it scares me sometimes. She gets that from you. Ethan looked at her surprised. What? The bravery. She told me you're her hero, and after watching you these past few weeks, the way you've built this business, the way you've fought for her, I can see why. Color rose in Ethan's cheeks. I'm not brave. I'm just doing what has to be done. That's what bravery is, doing what has to be done even when you're terrified. They held each other's gaze for a moment too long, something electric passing between them. Then Maddie knocked over her water cup, and the spell broke in a flurry of napkins and laughter. But Victoria felt it. The shift. The moment when casual friendship tipped toward something deeper, something with potential to be beautiful or complicated, or both. She should have pulled back, should have remembered all the reasons why getting involved with Ethan Cole was a bad idea. She lived in San Francisco. He lived in Maine. She ran a billion-dollar company. He ran a fishing boat. They came from different worlds, had different priorities, different futures. But when Maddie grabbed her hand and Ethan's, pulling them both toward the dock to watch the boats, Victoria didn't let go. Sometimes the smart choice and the right choice weren't the same thing, and Victoria had spent her whole life making smart choices. Maybe it was time to try something different. The call came at 2 a.m, shattering the silence of Victoria's hotel room like glass. She jerked awake, heart hammering, fumbling for her phone in the darkness. The screen showed Ethan's number, and ice flooded her veins. Hello? Victoria. His voice was tight, controlled in the way people got when they were barely holding themselves together. It's Maddie. We're at the hospital. She collapsed at home, her heart. They're stabilizing her now, but they're saying the surgery needs to happen sooner, tomorrow. They've moved up the date. Victoria was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with one hand. I'm coming. Which hospital? Portland Medical. But you don't have to. I'm coming. I'll be there in an hour. She made it in 45 minutes, breaking every speed limit on the dark highway between Seabrook and Portland. The hospital was a maze of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, but she found the cardiac wing easily enough. Ethan was in the waiting room, still in his pajama pants and a hastily thrown-on jacket, his face gray with exhaustion and fear. Victoria crossed the room without thinking, pulling him into a hug. He stiffened for half a second, then collapsed against her, his whole body trembling. "She was fine," he said into her shoulder, his voice breaking. "We had dinner, she did her homework, she went to bed. Then around midnight, I heard her monitor going off, and when I got to her room she couldn't breathe, her lips were blue, and I— Shh. It's okay. You got her here. She's getting help. They're saying the defect is worse than they thought, that waiting another 2 weeks could have—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria held him tighter, letting him take whatever strength he needed. Around them, the waiting room was mostly empty, except for a tired nurse at the desk and an elderly couple dozing in the corner. The clock on the wall read 3:15. Eventually, Ethan pulled back, wiping his eyes roughly. "Sorry, I shouldn't have called you. I didn't know who else—" "Don't apologize. I'm glad you called." Victoria guided him to a chair sitting beside him. "What did the doctors say?" "They're prepping her for surgery now. It'll happen at 6 this morning. Dr. Martinez is the surgeon. She's supposed to be one of the best pediatric cardiac specialists in the Northeast." Ethan's hands were shaking. The success rate is good, 85% for this type of repair. But that means 15%. Don't think about that. Think about the 85%. "I can't lose her, Victoria. She's all I have. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing's going to go wrong." Victoria took his hand, stilling their trembling. "Maddie's strong. She's a fighter, and she has the best surgeon and the best father. She's going to be fine." Ethan looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen the way she looks at you. That little girl has every reason in the world to fight. She's not going anywhere." They sat in silence after that, hands clasped, drawing strength from each other as the night slowly gave way to dawn. Around 4:30, a nurse brought them coffee and told them Maddie had been asking for her daddy. Ethan stood immediately, but the nurse shook her head gently. "They're getting her ready for surgery. You can see her right before they take her in, around 5:45. Dr. Martinez will come talk to you first." The next hour was the longest of Victoria's life, and she wasn't even the parent. She couldn't imagine what Ethan was going through, watching the clock tick toward the moment when his daughter would be wheeled into an operating room where anything could happen. He didn't speak, just stared at the wall with hollow eyes, and Victoria stayed beside him, a silent presence. Dr. Martinez appeared at 5:30, a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She explained the procedure in clear, careful terms. They would repair the septal defect, reinforce the weakened valve, and correct the irregular rhythm that had caused Maddie's collapse. It would take approximately 4 to 6 hours. The risks were standard for this type of surgery: infection, bleeding, adverse reaction to anesthesia, in rare cases stroke or death. "But," Dr. Martinez said, her voice firm, "I've done this procedure hundreds of times. Maddie's young, she's otherwise healthy, and we caught this before catastrophic failure. I fully expect her to come through this beautifully." Ethan nodded, mute with fear. The doctor squeezed his shoulder, then left to scrub in. At 5:40, a nurse led them to a pre-op room where Maddie lay on a gurney, looking impossibly small in her hospital gown. An IV ran into her arm, and monitors beeped softly beside her. But her eyes were open and alert, and when she saw Ethan, she smiled. "Hi, Daddy." Ethan's composure cracked. He bent over her, pressing his forehead to hers, his whole body shaking. "Hi, baby girl. How are you feeling?" "Sleepy. They gave me medicine that makes everything fuzzy." Maddie's words slurred slightly. "But that's okay. Dr. Martinez says after today my heart will work right. No more monitors. No more getting tired when I play. That's right. You're going to be so strong. Like you." Maddie's hand found his. "Daddy, don't be scared. I'm not scared." "You're braver than me." "I learned from the best." Maddie's eyes found Victoria, standing in the doorway. Miss Victoria came. Victoria stepped forward, her throat tight. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss this. Did you bring the drawing? The one I gave you? It's at the hotel, but I can bring it when you wake up. Okay. Good. Maddie's eyes were already drooping from the sedative. Daddy, after I'm better, can we go back for ice cream? The three of us? Ethan's voice was thick. Every day if you want. Promise? I promise. Okay. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby. So much. The surgical team arrived then, efficient and professional. They explained that Ethan could walk with them as far as the operating room doors. Then he'd need to return to the waiting room. Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched so tight Victoria could see the muscle jumping. He walked beside Maddie's gurney, holding her hand, whispering things Victoria couldn't hear. At the operating room doors, he kissed her forehead one last time. Maddie was barely conscious now, the sedative pulling her under, but she managed a sleepy smile. See you soon, Daddy. Then the doors swung shut, and she was gone. Ethan stood frozen, staring at those closed doors like if he looked away, he might lose her entirely. Victoria came up beside him, her hand finding his back. Come on, let's go wait. They returned to the waiting room. Ethan collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Victoria sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, and waited. There was nothing else to do. Nothing to say that would make this easier. At 6:15, her phone buzzed. Rebecca texting from San Francisco where it was 3 a.m. Just saw you're in Portland. Everything okay? Victoria typed back. Friend's daughter in surgery, I'll be out of touch for a few hours. Friend? Victoria looked at Ethan, at the man who'd saved her life and was now trusting her to be here for the most terrifying moment of his. Yeah, friend. The waiting was brutal. Every 15 minutes felt like an hour, and every hour felt like a lifetime. Ethan couldn't sit still. He paced the waiting room, drank coffee he couldn't taste, stared at his phone like willing it to ring would make news come faster. Victoria stayed anchored, the calm center he could orbit around. She answered work emails one-handed while keeping the other hand available if he needed to hold it. She made phone calls to Rebecca, quietly rearranging her schedule so she could stay in Portland as long as necessary. She existed as a steady, unshakable presence, the way he'd been for her when he'd carried her from the burning yacht. Some debts weren't financial. Some debts were paid in presence, in showing up, in refusing to let someone face their darkest moment alone. At 7:30, Ethan's phone rang. He lunged for it, his face going white. But it wasn't the hospital. It was Sheriff Brennan. Ethan, I know this is terrible timing, but I thought you should know. The Harrisons are in town. They heard about Maddie and they're on their way to the hospital. Ethan closed his eyes. Of course they are. I can try to keep them out if you want. Hospital security. No, they're her grandparents. They have a right to be here. Even if their presence was the last thing he needed. Thanks for the heads up. He hung up and looked at Victoria. Sarah's parents are coming. They'll probably use this as evidence that I'm not capable of taking care of her, that she'd be better off with them. Let them try. Victoria's voice was steel. You've done everything right. You got her the best medical care. You made sure she had the surgery she needed. If anything, this proves you're exactly the father she needs. 20 minutes later, Robert and Catherine Harrison arrived. They were exactly what Victoria expected. Wealthy, well-dressed, the kind of people who were used to rooms rearranging themselves around their presence. Robert was tall and silver-haired, with sharp eyes that assessed everything. Catherine was elegant in a way that money bought, her grief contained behind perfect makeup and designer clothes. They saw Ethan and headed straight for him, their expressions a complicated mix of concern and judgment. Ethan, Robert's voice was clipped. What happened? Her heart gave out last night. They moved up the surgery. She's in the operating room now. Catherine's hand went to her throat. Oh God, why didn't you call us? It was 2 a.m. and I was focused on getting her to the hospital. We should have been notified immediately. She's our granddaughter. I know who she is. Ethan's voice was tight. The hospital has your contact information. They would have called you if there were complications. Robert's eyes found Victoria, who'd stayed seated but watchful. And you are? Victoria Lane, a friend of Ethan's. Recognition flickered across both their faces. "The woman from the yacht," Catherine said. "We heard about that. How Ethan risked his life playing hero." The word playing was deliberate, designed to minimize and diminish. Victoria stood, drawing herself up to her full height, and met Catherine's gaze with the same intensity she brought to hostile board meetings. "Ethan saved my life. There was nothing playing about it. And I don't know what your relationship with him is, but I've spent enough time around him these past weeks to know that Maddie has the best father she could possibly have." Robert's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Ms. Lane, you've known them for what, a month? We've known Maddie since she was born. We watched our daughter die because Ethan couldn't afford better medical care." "That's not fair," Ethan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Sarah's accident had nothing to do with money. She was hit by a drunk driver. No amount of wealth would have saved her. But money could have given her a better life before that. Money could have made sure Maddie got surgery years ago instead of waiting until her heart nearly gave out. I got her the surgery as soon as the doctors said she was ready." Ethan's hands were clenched into fists. "Everything I've done has been for her. Every decision, every sacrifice. Sacrifice." Catherine's voice was bitter. "Is that what you call barely keeping a roof over her head? Missing mortgage payments? Living on a fishing boat's income while she needs specialized medical care?" Victoria stepped forward. "For your information, Ethan's financial situation has significantly improved. He's running a successful business supplying sustainable seafood to premium restaurants. He's current on all his bills, and Maddie's surgery is fully covered. So if you're planning to use his finances against him in court, you'll need a new argument." The Harrisons looked at her, then at Ethan, surprise evident on their faces. "You found work?" Robert asked. "I found a business partner." Ethan's voice was still tight, but there was something else there too. Pride, maybe. "Victoria's company distributes my product. It's legitimate, profitable, and it's given me the stability to provide everything Maddie needs." "How convenient," Catherine's eyes narrowed, "that the woman whose life you saved suddenly offers you a lucrative business deal right before a custody hearing." "It is convenient," Victoria said calmly. "It's also completely legal and well documented. I have contracts, financial statements, and testimony from multiple restaurant owners who can verify the legitimacy of the operation. If you'd like copies, I can have my lawyer send them over." The Harrisons exchanged a look, clearly recalibrating. They'd expected to find Ethan in crisis, desperate and vulnerable. Instead, they'd found him stable, supported, and defended by someone with resources that matched their own. Before anyone could say anything else, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Everyone turned toward her immediately, all other conflicts forgotten in the face of what mattered most. "She's out of surgery," Dr. Martinez said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. "It went beautifully. We repaired the defect, reinforced the valve, and her heart rhythm is already stronger. She'll need a few days in ICU for monitoring, then about a week in regular recovery, but I'm very optimistic about her long-term prognosis." Ethan's knees buckled. Victoria caught him, holding him up as the fear and tension of the past 6 hours finally released. "She's okay?" "She's more than okay. She's going to have a normal, healthy life." Dr. Martinez smiled. "You can see her in about an hour once she's settled in the ICU, but she's asking for her daddy already, which is a great sign." "Thank you." Ethan's voice broke. "Thank you so much." After the doctor left, the waiting room was quiet. Catherine was crying quietly into her husband's shoulder, relief warring with the complicated emotions of a grandmother who loved her granddaughter but couldn't let go of her resentment toward the father. Robert's face was unreadable, but his hands shook slightly as he patted his wife's back. Ethan stood apart from them, Victoria's hand still on his arm, and for a moment the usual animosity was suspended. They were just people who loved the same little girl, grateful beyond words that she was going to survive. "We'd like to see her," Robert said finally, "when she's ready for visitors." Ethan nodded. "Of course, you're her grandparents, but I see her first." "We wouldn't expect anything else." The hour wait felt longer than the entire surgery. Ethan couldn't stop moving, couldn't settle, his relief manifesting as restless energy. Victoria understood. She'd felt the same way after the yacht fire, that strange electric feeling of having survived something terrible. Finally, a nurse came to get them. Only immediate family in the ICU, which meant Ethan and the Harrisons. Victoria started to hang back, but Ethan caught her hand. "Come with me, please." "I'm not family. You're more family than they are right now." His grip was tight, almost desperate. "I need you there." The Harrisons looked like they wanted to object, but something in Ethan's expression stopped them. The nurse, wisely, said nothing and led them all down the hallway. Maddie was in a private room, surrounded by monitors that beeped and pulsed with the steady rhythm of a heart that was finally working right. She was pale, with tubes and wires connecting her to various machines, but her eyes were open and clear when they walked in. "Daddy." Her voice was small but strong. Ethan was at her bedside in 3 strides, taking her hand carefully, mindful of the IV. "Hi, baby girl. How are you feeling?" "Tired and sore. But Dr. Martinez says my heart is fixed. She says I can run and play and do everything normal kids do." "That's right. You're going to be so strong now." "Good." Maddie's eyes found the Harrisons standing awkwardly near the door. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Grandpa." Catherine moved forward, her composure cracking. "Oh, sweetheart, we were so worried about you." "I'm okay. Daddy made sure I got the best doctor." Maddie's hand tightened around Ethan's. "He takes really good care of me." It was a simple statement, a child's truth, but it landed in the room with the weight of testimony. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, and even Robert looked affected. They stayed for 20 minutes, long enough for Maddie to drift off to sleep from exhaustion and medication. The nurse ushered them out gently, explaining that Maddie needed rest and they could come back during regular visiting hours. In the hallway, the Harrisons lingered, clearly wanting to say something. Finally, Catherine spoke. "She looks happy. In spite of everything, she looks happy." Ethan nodded. "She is. We both are." "The business with Ms. Lane, is it really legitimate?" "Completely. I can show you the contracts if you want." Robert and Catherine exchanged another long look. Then Robert sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "We've been unfair to you, Ethan. Not about everything. You did struggle. That's not in question. But we've been so focused on what you couldn't give Maddie that we didn't see what you could. What you have given her." "Love," Catherine said softly. "Security. A father who'd do anything for her, even walk through fire for a stranger in the middle of the night because that's the kind of man he is." Ethan stared at them, clearly not trusting this sudden reversal. "What are you saying?" "We're saying," Robert cleared his throat, "we're saying maybe we've been approaching this wrong. Maybe instead of fighting you, we should be supporting you. Sarah would want that. She'd want Maddie with her father, surrounded by people who love her. The custody hearing. We'll withdraw the petition." Catherine's voice was firm despite the tears. "We'll talk to our lawyers tomorrow. Maddie belongs with you. She always has." The relief on Ethan's face was overwhelming. He swayed slightly, and Victoria steadied him again, her hand firm on his back. "Thank you," he managed. "You can still see her, be part of her life. We'd like that, but on your terms, as grandparents, not as—" Catherine couldn't finish. "Not as opponents," Robert completed. "We've wasted too much time fighting. Let's not waste any more." After they left, Ethan and Victoria stood alone in the hallway. The hospital hummed around them with its familiar sounds, beeping monitors, hushed conversations, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Ethan was shaking, and Victoria realized he was crying, tears streaming silently down his face. "It's over," he said, his voice breaking. "The custody battle, the fear of losing her. It's actually over." Victoria pulled him close, letting him collapse against her for the second time that day. "It's over. You won. Maddie gets to stay with her hero." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the bright fluorescent light of the hospital corridor. And somewhere in that embrace, something shifted between them. The boundaries that had kept them careful, kept them professional, began to dissolve. Because Victoria had shown up at 2 a.m. when he'd needed someone, had stood beside him through the worst hours of his life, had defended him to the Harrisons without being asked, had believed in him when everyone else saw only struggle and failure. And Ethan had let her in, had called her when he was breaking, had trusted her with his fear, had wanted her beside him in the ICU because her presence made the unbearable bearable. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. Wasn't just friendship or business or the complicated debt of saving and being saved. This was something else entirely. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan kept one hand on her arm, anchoring himself. You didn't have to come. You didn't have to stay, but you did. Of course I did. Why? Victoria looked at him, this man who'd risked everything to save her, who'd built a life from nothing through sheer determination, who loved his daughter with a fierceness that made Victoria's heart ache, and she realized the answer was simple. Because you matter to me, both of you. Ethan's eyes searched hers. Victoria, I know this is complicated. I know the timing is terrible, but I need you to know. She took a breath. I didn't come to Maine to find you. I didn't plan any of this. But now that I'm here, now that I know you, I can't imagine leaving and never seeing you again. You have a company to run, a life in California. I have a laptop and video conferencing. The company survived this long, it'll survive me working remotely a while longer. Victoria's hand found his. Unless you want me to leave, unless this is just, it's not just anything. Ethan's grip tightened. You terrify me. This terrifies me. I haven't let anyone close since Sarah died. Haven't wanted to. But you walked into my life like a storm. And now He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Now you what? Now I want you to stay. I want to see where this goes. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I want to try. If you're willing to try with me. Victoria felt her breath catch. Around them, the hospital continued its rhythm, indifferent to this moment. But for her, for them, the world had narrowed to just this, his hand on her face, his eyes searching hers, the possibility of something new and terrifying and beautiful. I'm willing, she said softly. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and careful and full of promise. It lasted only a moment, but it felt like a beginning. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, the kind of tentative, hopeful smiles that came with taking a risk and finding out it might just work. We should probably figure out logistics at some point, Victoria said. The distance, the schedules. Later. Right now, I just want to sit with my daughter and know she's going to be okay. And I want you there. If you'll stay. I'll stay as long as you need me. Careful. I might hold you to that. Please do. They returned to Maddie's room and settled into the chairs beside her bed. Outside, the sun was fully up now, October light streaming through the windows. Maddie slept peacefully, her monitors showing strong, steady heartbeats. And Ethan and Victoria sat side by side, hands clasped between them, watching over the little girl who'd somehow brought them together. Neither of them knew what came next. Didn't know how to navigate a relationship across 3,000 miles. How to balance a fishing boat in Maine with a tech empire in California, how to build something real when the foundation was this strange and complicated. But they had time to figure it out. For the first time in years, Ethan had time. The custody battle was over. Maddie was healthy. The business was stable. He could breathe, could think about something beyond survival. And Victoria had found something worth staying for, something that mattered more than quarterly earnings and product launches. Something real. Around 3 that afternoon, Maddie woke up asking for ice cream. The nurses laughed and promised it after she'd managed solid food. She complained but accepted it, then looked at her father and Victoria with knowing eyes far too wise for 8 years old. You're holding hands, she observed. Ethan and Victoria glanced down at their intertwined fingers, caught. We are, Ethan admitted. Good. Maddie smiled, settling back against her pillows. Mrs. Chen was right. You do like each other. You need to stop talking to Mrs. Chen about my personal life. She's very wise, and she said you've been lonely since Mommy died. She said maybe Miss Victoria could make you not lonely anymore. Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, maybe she could. Maddie's smile widened. Then she winced slightly, her hand going to her chest. Ethan was on his feet immediately, but she waved him off. I'm okay, just sore. The nurse said it would hurt for a while. You want me to call someone? No, I just want you both here, talking and holding hands and being happy. Because you know what? Maddie's eyes were bright. I think everything's going to be okay now. I think we're all going to be okay. And looking at her, at this brave little girl with her fixed heart and her unshakable optimism, Victoria believed it. Maybe they would all be okay. Maybe this strange, complicated, unexpected connection would turn into something lasting. Maybe a rescue in the dark, a vanishing act in the fog, and a business deal built on trust had been leading here all along, to a hospital room bathed in afternoon light, where three people who'd found each other against all odds were becoming something like a family. It was too soon to say for certain, too fragile to name completely, but it felt like possibility, and for now, that was enough. Maddie came home from the hospital on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the surgery. The October sky was impossibly blue, the kind of crystalline autumn day that made Maine look like a postcard. Ethan carried her from the car to the house, despite her protests that she could walk, and Victoria followed with the discharge papers and a teddy bear the nurses had given Maddie as a going-away present. Mrs. Chen had decorated the porch with a handmade banner that read, "Welcome home, Maddie," in bright marker colors, and half the neighbors from the street had gathered to wave and cheer. Maddie beamed from her father's arms, waving back like a returning queen, and Victoria felt something warm and complicated bloom in her chest at the sight. This was what community looked like, what home felt like when it was built on more than just walls and a roof. Inside, the house smelled like the casserole misses. Chen had left in the oven and fresh flowers sat on every surface, gifts from people in town who'd been following Maddie's recovery. Ethan settled his daughter on the couch, surrounding her with pillows and blankets until she looked like a princess in a nest. "Daddy, I'm not made of glass," Maddie complained, but she was smiling. "Dr. Martinez said I could do normal activities. Normal, easy activities, not running marathons. I don't want to run a marathon. I want to watch TV and eat ice cream. That I can do." Ethan turned to Victoria, who'd been hanging back near the doorway, unsure of her place in this homecoming. "You staying for dinner?" It was the first time they'd been alone together. Well, alone with Maddie, since the hospital. Victoria had stayed in Portland through Maddie's recovery, but there had always been nurses and doctors and the Harrisons visiting. Private moments had been scarce, stolen glances across hospital beds and brief conversations in hallways. Now they were here, in Ethan's home, and Victoria felt suddenly uncertain. This was real life, not the suspended reality of crisis. This was where they'd find out if what happened in the hospital could survive in the everyday world. "If you're sure I'm not intruding." "You're not." Ethan's voice was firm. "You're never intruding. Right, Maddie?" "Right. Miss Victoria has to stay. We're going to watch my favorite movie and she hasn't seen it yet." Maddie patted the couch beside her. "Come sit." So Victoria stayed. They ate Mrs. Chen's casserole at the coffee table, watched an animated movie about talking animals that Maddie had apparently seen 50 times but never got tired of, and fell into an easy rhythm that felt almost like family. When Maddie started to doze off halfway through the movie, Ethan carried her to bed, and Victoria cleaned up the dishes, moving around the kitchen with the careful awareness of being in someone else's space. Ethan found her at the sink, drying the last plate. He took it from her hands, set it aside, and pulled her close without a word. Victoria melted into him, her arms sliding around his waist, her head resting against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For showing up at the hospital, for staying, for being here now. I don't have words for what it means." "You don't need words." They stood like that for a long moment, swaying slightly in the dim kitchen light. Then Ethan pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression serious. "I want to do this right," he said. "Whatever this is between us, I want to do it right. But I don't know how. I haven't dated anyone since Sarah, haven't wanted to. And you're in California, running a company, living a completely different life. I don't know how we make this work." Victoria had been thinking about the same thing, had spent the past week lying awake in her hotel room, trying to figure out the logistics of a relationship that made no practical sense. "What if I stayed?" Ethan blinked. "What?" "What if I stayed in Maine, not permanently, not right away, but what if I split my time? I could work remotely, Come back to San Francisco when absolutely necessary. The company's stable. I have good people running day-to-day operations. I don't need to be in the office every day. Victoria, you can't upend your entire life for you? For Maddie, why not? She cupped his face, making him look at her. I've spent the last decade building a company. It's been my whole life, my only priority, and it's been good. I'm proud of what I've built. But it's also been lonely. I've been lonely, and then I came here and found... She paused, searching for the right words. I found something worth staying for. Someone worth staying for. Two someones. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you're good and brave and you love your daughter more than anything. I know Maddie is smart and funny and has a heart bigger than this whole town. I know that when I'm with you both, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Victoria's voice caught. And maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's too fast. But I almost died in that fire, Ethan. I got a second chance at life, and I don't want to waste it on what makes sense. I want to spend it on what makes me happy. Ethan stared at her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to protect himself and Maddie from potential hurt, fighting against the part that wanted to take this risk, to reach for happiness even if it scared him. What about when the newness wears off, he said finally. When you realize what you're giving up, the city, the career advancement, the life you built. What happens when you wake up one day and regret choosing us? I won't. You can't know that. You're right. I can't. Victoria took his hands. But here's what I do know. I regret plenty of things in my life. I regret not spending more time with my parents before they died. I regret missing my brother's college graduation because of a business meeting. I regret every relationship I sabotaged because I was too focused on work. But I've never regretted showing up for people I care about. And I care about you, both of you. So, no, I can't promise I'll never have doubts or hard days, but I can promise I won't regret trying. Ethan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I'm terrified, he admitted, of letting you in, of Maddie getting attached, of building something real and having it fall apart. But I'm more terrified of letting you walk away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Then don't let me walk away. I don't want to. God, I really don't want to. He pulled her close again, pressing his forehead to hers. Okay, let's try. Let's figure this out together. Victoria felt relief and joy and terror all crash through her at once. This was happening. They were doing this. And it was reckless and impractical and absolutely right. We should probably set some ground rules, she said. Take things slow, especially with Maddie. She's been through so much, she doesn't need adults complicating her life. Agreed. We keep things casual around her for now. Let her adjust to being home, being healthy. And we figure out the logistics. How often I'm here, how often you can come to California. I can't leave Maddie much, not for a while. I know, so I'll come here. I'll find a better place than the inn, maybe rent a house, set up a proper office. Make it sustainable, long-term. Ethan laughed softly. You're really doing this, planning it all out. It's what I do. I plan. Victoria smiled. But I'm also learning to be flexible, to let things unfold without controlling every variable. That must be hard for you. Terrifying, but also kind of exciting. They kissed then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, the fear giving way to something that felt like hope. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Victoria rented a house on the outskirts of Seabrook, a weathered colonial with a view of the ocean and enough space for a home office. She filled it with laptops and monitors and video conferencing equipment, transforming it into a remote headquarters. Rebecca was skeptical at first, but even she had to admit that Victoria's productivity hadn't suffered. If anything, the distance from the office politics and daily fires had given Victoria more space to think strategically. She split her time between work and Seabrook life. Mornings she spent on calls with her team in San Francisco, reviewing code and product roadmaps. Afternoons, she'd walk down to the harbor, watching Ethan and his crew bring in their catches, marveling at the efficiency they'd built. The sustainable seafood business was thriving, with new restaurant clients signing on every week. Evenings were for Maddie. Victoria would stop by their house for dinner, helping with homework or just sitting on the couch while Maddie chattered about her day. The girl was recovering beautifully, her energy returning in bounds. Dr. Martinez's predictions had been right. The surgery had given Maddie a new lease on life. She could run without getting winded, could play with friends without needing breaks, could just be a normal 8-year-old. And slowly, carefully, Victoria became part of their daily routine. Not as a replacement for Sarah, that was never the goal, and Maddie's mother would always hold a sacred place in their home. But as someone new, someone who cared deeply and showed up consistently and loved them both in her own way. The Harrisons visited twice that month, and both times were surprisingly pleasant. They'd kept their word about withdrawing the custody petition, and their lawyer had filed the paperwork the day after Maddie's surgery. Robert and Catherine were different now, softer, more willing to listen. They took Maddie for weekend visits to Boston, bringing her to museums and shows, but always bringing her home to Ethan at the end. "They're trying," Ethan told Victoria one evening as they walked along the beach, Maddie having gone to bed early after a busy day. "I can see them trying to be grandparents instead of adversaries. It's strange but good." "People can change," Victoria said, "when they're motivated enough." Seeing Maddie almost die motivated them. Ethan's voice was quiet. "Made them realize what was important. Made me realize some things too." "Like what?" "Like I don't have to do everything alone. Like accepting help doesn't make me weak." He took her hand. "Like maybe I deserve to be happy again." Victoria squeezed his fingers. "You do. You absolutely do." Thanksgiving came faster than expected. Victoria had planned to fly back to San Francisco to spend it with David, but her brother surprised her by suggesting he come to Maine instead. "I want to meet this fisherman who's turned my workaholic sister into a remote worker," David said over video call. "Plus, I've never had a real New England Thanksgiving. Sounds festive." So David flew into Portland 2 days before Thanksgiving, renting a car and driving up to Seabrook with the good-natured curiosity of someone who'd heard a lot about a place but never seen it. Victoria met him at a rental house, and he gave her a long hug before pulling back to study her face. "You look different," he said. "I've been getting more sleep." "That's not it. You look—" He paused, searching for the word. "Happy. Actually happy, not just successful." Victoria felt herself flush. "Maybe I am." "This is serious, isn't it? You and the fisherman." "His name is Ethan, and yes, it's serious." David whistled low. "Never thought I'd see the day." Victoria Lane, tech mogul, choosing a small-town life over Silicon Valley. "I'm not choosing one over the other. I'm trying to find balance." "And is it working?" Victoria thought about her mornings at the harbor, her afternoons coding and strategizing, her evenings with Ethan and Maddie, the way she felt grounded here in a way she'd never felt in California, despite all her success. "Yeah, I think it is." She brought David to meet Ethan and Maddie that evening. Victoria had been nervous about it. David was protective, and he'd have strong opinions about anyone his sister was dating. But Ethan charmed him immediately with his quiet competence and self-deprecating humor, and Maddie won him over completely by showing him her collection of sea glass and explaining in elaborate detail how she'd found each piece. They had dinner at Ethan's house, simple pasta and salad, nothing fancy. And Victoria watched her brother and her boyfriend talk about fishing and technology and what it was like to lose parents young. David had been 15 when their parents died. Ethan had been a teenager when his own father left. They found common ground in that shared loss and the way it shaped you into someone who protected what they loved fiercely. After dinner, David helped Maddie with a puzzle while Ethan and Victoria cleaned up in the kitchen. "He's good with her," Ethan observed, watching David patiently search for corner pieces while Maddie directed him with the authority of a drill sergeant. "He helped raise me after our parents died. He knows kids." "He loves you. I can see it in how he looks at you, like he's making sure you're really okay." "That's David, protective to a fault." Victoria smiled. "But he likes you, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because he's not interrogating you about your intentions. Trust me, if he had doubts, you'd know." Later, after Maddie had gone to bed and they were all sitting on the porch with beers, David turned to Ethan with sudden seriousness. "So what are your intentions? With my sister?" Victoria groaned. "David, it's okay," Ethan said. He looked at David steadily. "My intentions are to make her happy. to build something real with her, if she'll let me, to introduce her to my daughter slowly and carefully, making sure everyone's ready for what this means, and to not screw it up, though I'm terrified I will because I'm just a fisherman from Maine and she's—" He gestured at Victoria. "She's extraordinary." David studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Good answer. And for the record, you're not just a fisherman. You're also a small business owner, a single father who's raised an incredible kid, and apparently some kind of hero. I'd say that makes you extraordinary too." Ethan looked uncomfortable with the praise, but pleased. "Thanks. Just don't hurt her. Because I've seen Victoria hurt before, and I don't want to see it again." "Neither do I." Ethan's voice was firm. "Trust me, hurting her is the last thing I want." After David left for the night, driving back to Victoria's rental house where he was staying, Ethan pulled Victoria close on the porch steps. "Your brother's intense," he said. "He's protective, but he likes you." "How can you tell?" Victoria laughed. "Because he gave you the threat about not hurting me. He only does that when he approves. If he didn't like you, he'd just be polite and freeze you out." "Well, that's terrifying, but good to know." Ethan kissed her temple. "Thanksgiving is in 2 days. You're coming here, right? Mrs. Chen is cooking for half the neighborhood, but she's insisting I host at my place." "Wouldn't miss it. David too?" "Of course. The more the merrier." Thanksgiving Day dawned cold and bright, with frost on the grass and the smell of wood smoke in the air. Victoria and David walked over to Ethan's house around noon, carrying pies Victoria had stress-baked at 3 in the morning because she'd been too nervous to sleep. "You're nervous about Thanksgiving?" David had asked, watching her roll out dough with surgical precision. "I'm nervous about everything. This is the first real holiday with Ethan and Maddie. What if it's weird? What if we're moving too fast? Vic, you've been dating him for 2 months and you moved across the country. I think the too fast ship has sailed." Helpful, very helpful. But David had helped her finish the pies. Apple and pumpkin, both perfect. And now they were standing on Ethan's porch while voices and laughter spilled from inside. Ethan opened the door, flour on his shirt, and a harried expression that melted into a smile when he saw Victoria. "Thank God. I need backup. Mrs. Chen has taken over my kitchen and Maddie's hyper on pie samples, and I'm pretty sure we're cooking enough food for 50 people. Victoria laughed and kissed him quickly. "Sounds perfect." Inside was controlled chaos. Mrs. Chen commanded the kitchen with the authority of a general, directing Ethan and 2 other neighbors in the preparation of turkey, stuffing, potatoes, and at least 6 different side dishes. Maddie was setting the table with intense concentration, making sure every fork and knife was perfectly aligned. The Harrisons were there too, Robert helping with the heavy lifting while Catherine arranged flowers. It was warm and loud and overwhelming in the best possible way. Victoria introduced David to everyone, and he slipped into the chaos with easy charm, helping where needed and entertaining Maddie with stories about Victoria as a child. The house smelled like roasting turkey and cinnamon, and the particular warmth that came from a home filled with people who cared about each other. They ate at 3 o'clock, cramming everyone around Ethan's dining table with folding chairs borrowed from neighbors. Mrs. Chen led them in a blessing that mentioned gratitude and family and second chances, and Victoria felt her throat tighten at the appropriateness of it all. This was her second chance, not just at life, but at living it right. During dinner, they went around the table sharing what they were grateful for. When it came to Maddie, she thought for a long moment before speaking. "I'm grateful for my new heart," she said, "and for my daddy, who takes care of me even when it's hard, and for Grandma and Grandpa, who came back, and for Miss Victoria." She smiled at Victoria with such pure affection that Victoria felt her eyes sting. "Who saved my daddy from being sad all the time." Ethan's hand found Victoria's under the table, squeezing tight. When it was Victoria's turn, she looked around at the faces gathered here. Ethan and Maddie, David, the Harrisons, Mrs. Chen, and the neighbors whose names she was still learning. People who'd become important to her in the space of a few short months. "I'm grateful for being here," she said simply. "For finding this place, these people, for getting a second chance to figure out what really matters." After dinner, while the adults cleaned up and dessert was being prepared, Victoria found Maddie on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the harbor in the fading light. "Hey," Victoria sat beside her. "You okay?" "Uh-huh. Just thinking." "About what?" Maddie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you love my daddy?" The question caught Victoria off guard, but she didn't deflect. Maddie deserved honesty. "I do, very much. And me? And you? So much, Maddie." "Good." Maddie leaned against Victoria's side. "Because I love you too. And I think my mommy would like you. Would like that daddy's not alone anymore." Victoria's vision blurred with tears. "You think so?" "Yeah, mommy always wanted daddy to be happy. She used to tell me that before she died. She'd say, 'Take care of your daddy, make sure he smiles.' And he didn't smile much for a long time. But he smiles when you're around. He smiles because of you. You make him happier than anything." "We both do," Maddie said with the wisdom of someone far older than 8. "Together, we make him really happy, like a family." Victoria wrapped her arm around the girl, holding her close. "Yeah, like a family." They sat like that until Ethan came looking for them, his expression softening when he saw them together. "There you are. We're about to cut the pie." "We're coming." Victoria stood, helping Maddie up. "Just having a talk." "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Maddie said, taking Victoria's hand. "Come on, I want pumpkin pie." They went back inside, back to the warmth and the laughter and the people who were becoming Victoria's people. David caught her eye across the room and smiled. A look that said, "You did good, sis." The Harrisons were laughing at something Mrs. Chen said. Their faces relaxed in a way Victoria had never seen before. And Ethan watched her with such open affection that Victoria felt it like a physical touch. This was it. This was the life she was choosing. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and full and worth every sacrifice. Later that night, after everyone had left and Maddie was in bed, Victoria and Ethan sat on his porch wrapped in the same blanket. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the harbor was quiet except for the gentle lap of waves. "That was a good day," Ethan said. "The best." "Maddie told me what you two talked about Sarah." Victoria tensed slightly. "I hope that's okay. I didn't want to overstep." "You didn't. She's right. Sarah would have liked you. Would have been grateful that someone's here taking care of both of us." Ethan turned to face her. "I need to tell you something I've been thinking about for weeks but haven't known how to say." Victoria's heart picked up speed. "Okay. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe already have fallen." His voice was steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated, but it's true. You walked into my life like a force of nature and changed everything. Made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond just survival. Made me believe in second chances." Victoria felt tears spill over, warm on her cold cheeks. "I love you too. I think I have since you pulled me out of that fire. Since you saved my life and then disappeared because protecting your daughter mattered more than recognition or reward or anything else. I'd do it again, save you again. Every time." "I know. That's what makes you extraordinary." They kissed then, long and deep, tasting of pumpkin pie and promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "So what now?" Ethan asked. "Where do we go from here?" Victoria thought about her rental house down the road, her company thriving despite, or perhaps because of, her absence from daily operations. She thought about Maddie sleeping inside, healthy and whole. She thought about the life she'd built in California, the career she'd dedicated everything to. And she thought about mornings at the harbor, watching Ethan work. About dinners around his kitchen table, laughing at Maddie's stories. About the way this small town had wrapped itself around her, making space for her in its rhythms and routines. "I restructure the company," she said. "Make myself truly remote. Hire a COO to handle day-to-day operations in San Francisco while I focus on strategy and vision from here. I keep the rental house, make it permanent, and we build this." She gestured between them. "We build us. Slowly, carefully, making sure Maddie's okay with every step." "You'd really do that? Give up California?" "I'm not giving it up. I'm just choosing to live here and visit there instead of the other way around." Victoria cupped his face. "I'm choosing you, both of you, because what we have is worth more than any amount of success in Silicon Valley. Ethan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You absolutely do. They sat wrapped in each other and the blanket, watching the stars wheel overhead, and made plans. Real plans, practical plans. Victoria would fly back to San Francisco after Christmas to put things in motion, hire the COO, restructure her role, set up the company for long-term remote leadership. Ethan would come visit in the spring, bring Maddie to see California, let her experience Victoria's other world. They'd take it slow with Maddie, making sure she was comfortable with each new step in their relationship. Maybe in a year, maybe two, they'd talk about Victoria moving into Ethan's house, about making it official. But for now, this was enough. More than enough. The night stretched on, cold and clear, and eventually they went inside where it was warm. Ethan walked Victoria to the door, kissing her goodnight with the sweetness of new love mixed with the depth of something already becoming permanent. Thank you, he said against her lips, for showing up that morning at the hospital, for staying, for choosing us. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart and your daughter. Best decision I ever made. Victoria walked home through the quiet streets of Seabrook, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart full to bursting. David was still awake when she got back, sitting in the living room with his laptop. Good night? He asked, though her face probably told him everything he needed to know. The best night. You're really doing this. Moving here, building a life with them. I really am. David closed his laptop and stood, pulling her into a hug. I'm proud of you, Vic, for taking this risk, for choosing happiness over success. I'm not choosing one over the other. I'm just redefining what success means. That's very wise. When did you get wise? When I almost died and a fisherman I didn't know risked everything to save me? Victoria pulled back, smiling. Perspective is funny like that. Over the next month, Victoria did exactly what she'd promised. She flew back to San Francisco, spent 2 intense weeks hiring a COO and restructuring the company, and returned to Maine with a lighter load and a clearer conscience. The company didn't fall apart without her constant presence. If anything, it thrived, her team rising to fill the space she'd left. Christmas came with snow and lights strung across Main Street. Victoria spent it at Ethan's house, helping Maddie bake cookies and watching her open presents with the unbridled joy of a child who'd been given a second chance at life. The Harrisons came for Christmas dinner, and Catherine pulled Victoria aside to thank her for everything she'd done for their family. You didn't just save Ethan, Catherine said quietly. You saved all of us. Gave us a chance to be a real family again. Victoria hugged her, feeling the complicated knot of their relationship, once adversaries, now allies, bound together by love for the same little girl. As the year turned from autumn to winter, Victoria's life in Seabrook solidified. She joined the local business association, started mentoring young entrepreneurs at the community center, became a regular at Mrs. Chen's coffee mornings. The town accepted her fully, not as the billionaire tech CEO, but as Victoria, Ethan's girlfriend, Maddie's friend, part of the fabric of their community. And every morning, she woke up in her house by the ocean and felt grateful. Grateful to be alive, to have found this place, to have been saved by a man brave enough to run into fire for a stranger and stubborn enough to refuse her help until she'd proven it wasn't charity. Ethan had saved her life on that burning yacht, but she'd saved his too, in a different way, had shown him that accepting help wasn't weakness, that letting someone in wasn't betrayal, that life after loss could be full and rich and worth living fully. They'd saved each other. And in doing so, they'd built something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them needed. A second chance at family, at love, at believing in happy endings. One February evening, as snow fell softly over the harbor and Maddie slept upstairs in her room, Ethan found Victoria in his kitchen making tea. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Move in with us, he said quietly. Victoria turned in his arms. What? Move in. Officially. Stop pretending you live in that rental when you're here every night anyway. Maddie wants it. I want it. We want you here. Really here. Victoria felt her heart expand. Are you sure? That's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything. Ethan kissed her softly. You're already part of this family. Let's make it official. So she did. Victoria moved into Ethan's house in March, when the harbor ice was breaking and spring was just beginning to whisper its promises. They cleared out Sarah's things together, not erasing her but making space for the future alongside the past. Victoria set up her office in the spare room, filling it with monitors and whiteboards and all the tools of her trade. Maddie helped decorate, hanging drawings on the walls and placing sea glass on Victoria's desk for luck. And on the first night Victoria officially lived there, the three of them sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the stars come out over the water. "This is my family now," Maddie said, snuggled between them. "All of us together." "Yeah," Ethan agreed, his arm around Victoria's shoulders. "This is family." Victoria looked at them, this man who'd saved her, this girl who'd welcomed her, and felt the last piece of her heart slot into place. She'd spent years building an empire, chasing success, thinking that achievement would fill the empty spaces inside her. But what filled those spaces wasn't money or recognition or power. It was this: love, connection, belonging. It was a small house on a hill in Maine, where a widowed fisherman and his brave daughter had shown her what really mattered. It was the choice to run into the fire for someone you didn't know, and the willingness to let yourself be saved in return. It was second chances and new beginnings, and the courage to build something real even when it scared you. Months later, on a warm June evening with the harbor full of boats and the air smelling of salt and summer, Ethan took Victoria back to the dock where they'd first talked, where she'd approached him with a business proposal that had been so much more than business, and he'd been too proud and scared to see it. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Victoria's breath caught. "This isn't what you think." "Well, it is, but also it isn't." Ethan opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond, clearly vintage. "This was my grandmother's ring. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to someone who deserved it. Someone who understood that love isn't about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, even when it's hard." "Ethan, I'm not proposing, not yet. Maddie and I talked, and we both agree it's too soon, but I wanted you to have this, to know that this is where we're heading, that you're not just someone I'm dating, you're someone I'm building a future with." His voice was steady, sure. "Your family, Victoria, and when the time is right, when Maddie's ready and we're ready, I'm going to ask you properly. But for now, I just want you to know that I see a future with you, a whole life." Victoria took the ring with shaking hands, slipping it onto her right hand where it fit perfectly. "I see it too, a whole life together." They kissed as the sun set over Seabrook Harbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And Victoria knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She'd been saved from a fire, yes, but more than that, she'd been saved from a life that was all achievement and no joy, all success and no meaning. Ethan and Maddie had given her something worth living for, and in return, she'd given them stability, love, and a future bright with possibility. Some rescues happened in a moment, in fire and smoke and desperate courage. But others happened slowly, day by day, as two people chose each other again and again, building something lasting from the ashes of what they'd lost. This was that kind of rescue, and it was only just beginning.